Hello and welcome, my name is Fig Fairytale and this is the 5th video in the Let's Build a Home series. Now, since last video I changed my mind a bit about how I want to do the shadowing section of this tutorial. I decided to already go ahead and apply the same things I did in the living room to the kitchen. It's really just rinse and repeat. I don't want you guys to see me do the same thing over and over and over again, because that's just not very interesting to look at, and I'll show you some of the things that might be cool or interesting to do in the kitchen. But as you will see, and I'll go over the things I've already done for you, I've put shadows along the sides of the windows. I kept the of the walls, sorry. I kept the windows a bit free of shadows, though I did put a small pathway around it. Here you see that's a very thin one. And in the living room, I also made a trail along these newspapers here along, maybe I can highlight it, rough, along the plants. Make sure that these sections, for example, within or on top of the cabinet, are a bit darker. I still want to do a few improvements in the living room that I would really like to show you guys anyway. I added some shadows over here to give the impression that the light that comes in through the window is stopped by the edges. I also did the same thing over here, not only the trailing along the side but also on top of the objects. And here in the kitchen I also trailed the edges of the crates. I put a tad larger shadow over here because part of the light from this window is blocked by the crate. The other part of the light that comes from here is blocked by this crate itself. And there's still some shadows to place. I also put a few in these thin stretches between the walls and pieces of furniture. And I trailed these objects that are underneath the table over here. From here on forward, I will be sure to explain the things that are of interest in the video and then just apply them over the entirety of the building in between videos, just because it's, well, not that interesting to look at. We'll leave this room for now, however. I mentioned in the previous video that I often do staircases first, but right now we're gonna do it last, and this is something I would like to show you guys how I go about this. There's still a few assets to place here as well, so I'll save that for, I think, the next video, and hope that we can finish up the indoors section within a video or two. Now, without further ado, I would like to get to this crate again, because as you will see right now, these planks have a distinctly brighter color than the ones that are at the bottom of the crate, and that does make sense to some extent because, well, it's at the bottom, not a lot of light can fall into the crate, but they really pop and I want them to blend in more. And this is something I do very often with practically every object. I highlight the edges with a shadow path, so basically shade the edge. We'll put it bigger, and I'll trail the edge just to make sure. We'll take a bit darker one. Go, that's better. Just to make sure that they flow over into each other a bit more naturally. I can't really explain if this is, you know, proper how light behaves generally in real life. It's just something I do in my maps practically all the time, and it looks really good. So I'd recommend you do the same if you want to, of course. And you shouldn't overdo it. For example, right here, we'll just put some edge. We'll get to this one in a second. And it just looks a bit toned down and quite natural, and it looks really good. So we're going to do the same thing for these kind of objects, but with these ones I trail them in the center. Trail in the center, and this one is, yeah. And we're gonna put a shadow on top of it just to tone the general color down of the object. And this is a trick you can use on, well, a lot of different things. Because you have colorable assets, and some assets you can't change the color at all. And if you still want to tone them down or make them a bit brighter, this is really the way to go. Right now you see they're a bit darker, except for the actual edges of the planks themselves. And that's fine, because those would be the places that catch the light anyway. And now it already looks quite a bit more neutral, and as if it's one object. And now to even increase the coherence between these few objects, we're going to trill a few shadows here along the sides. And this one is too big, so we'll make it really thin, and we'll give the impression that it casts a shadow on the sack down there. And I'll start a bit further inwards over here, a bit further there, over here. And now you see that these already start to drop underneath the planks that we put in on previous videos. And I'm moving them a bit to the center because I think they're a tad too dark. And when they're too dark, it indicates that they're like significantly lower than the edge of the crate, and that doesn't make sense because a bottle is quite long as an object. So I'm moving them away a little bit from the edge. The shadow, however, still touches on the bottles, so it creates quite a nice effect. And now I do see that the sack is still a bit bright in there. So we'll take a very light shadow path and just tone down the color a little bit. There we go. And now it already looks quite a bit more cohesive than it did before. And I think that's as far as I would like to go with that for now. Now we get to the plan that I placed at the end of the video, at the end of the last video. And we're going to add some shadows here as well, because we want to make sure that it looks like it's below the walls and it's not a very tall plant. But we also want to have it fall inside the windowsill. And for that we'll again take a few paths. This time I will use the double path instead of the single. And at layer 4 we can already put in some shadows on this side, make it a bit brighter and make it go a bit further outwards. Go. Now we're going to put it on 7 above walls, and I want to make the side that is facing, sorry, it has to go one high above roof. I want the side that's not facing the window to be a bit darker, like we did with the previous one. So there we go. And we need a shadow being cast from the wall on the side here as well. So let's see if we can make it a bit darker, like so. Quite reasonable. There we go. You could spend 5 hours on perfecting this, perfecting that, but I don't want to do that, especially not in the video. So we'll continue. We're going to put it again on layer 2. That's very much lower. And we'll trill a few more objects here and there, especially pen here. I 3 is correct. That is correct. And with this one, I especially want to have a shadow cast outwards from the window, so the light will hit this side of the pen and the opposite side will be a bit darker. So the same goes for the large pen over here. We want to make the back side quite dark, and we want to trill a very thin shadow along the front end of the stove as well. So perfect. We have to put in some shadows, like on the edges of this one, of these doorposts as well. Make sure that they're included in general rules that we apply for shadowing. That a bit larger. We'll turn it a bit sideways. So, because there's light coming from this window that hits the post over here, and then you have a bit of a sharp edge right there. And I already like where this is going, actually. Looks quite neat. We're going to leave this light off now. It's a nice asset, but it doesn't have to be lit up. And I always take a moment to zoom out, just look at my map and see if there are things that just look weird or stand out. That's the same way how I realized that these two assets were on layer 4 instead of layer 3, because they're on top of a shadow. And usually you can notice these things if you just take a moment to look at your map. It also helps you to find some places that are shadowed a bit unnaturally. And this bookshelf over here is a bit too dark in my opinion, so I will get to that in a sec. We lit up this candle, so we do want to put in a light over here. And we'll just make it a small light, like so. But we'll use that when we place some shadows around the objects over here. And I'll fix up the shelf in between videos, so you guys won't have to watch that. Though I think it will be interesting to shade a few objects on the kitchen table. So, we also want to do the same thing, the baskets, like we did with the crate. So we'll drill a shadow along the side here and there. Just to make it a bit darker, we'll take the double shadows and we'll make the area in between breads where they overlap a bit darker. And I think when I redo this path, I'll light up this area a bit, because right now 2 shadows overlap in this area, making the basket very dark. And I want it to be a bit more present, so I'll fix that. We also want to put in some shadows, like thinly around these objects over here, just at the back where the shadows would probably be, considering the light sources. There we go. I already like the shadow that this cupboard has, so I won't do too much about that. This one, however, will cast a bit of a shadow because there's a candle right next to it. I will trail a darker path around the edge first, and then a bit further outwards we'll take the shadow path 25 and do the same thing. I also would like to put a little bit of shadow around the pieces of meat that we have laying around here. We have to be on layer 7. And we just go around this. And now we do the same thing with the meat that's in the pan and the edge of the pan itself. We go. That looks good. Yeah, this is cool. All right, I'm going to cut out this video a bit early. I think this is what I would like to do for now. The next video will be focusing on the staircase, adding the shadows and a few assets over here. And I'll explain the things that I've changed and within the kitchen. All in all, I really like how this house is coming along. I think we'll have quite a cozy place. Now, I do notice that these eggs are a bit bright, so I'll tone that down a bit as well. If you liked this video, please hit the like, favorite or subscribe button. It helps me tremendously, gets my video out there, and I hope to see you again in the next video.